The case we have all been following has finally come to an end. Plessy versus Ferguson has concluded with an understanding that whites and blacks are quote-unquote separate but equal. What does this mean for us? People of every race will have equal opportunity to things like education, housing, and public transportation, but will be utilizing these opportunities separately.
Breaking news. Many special education students have been expelled from many schools. Why is this? It is not due to disrespectful behavior or for causing an uproar in the classroom. Students were simply suspended for facial abnormalities and even drooling. May I mention that all students' mental capacities were fine, but fellow students and teachers were quote-unquote nauseated at this site.
A new wave has been made in the education world by the founding of a new advocacy group for children with disabilities called the Council for Exceptional Children, or CEC. Their hope is that the children with special needs will have the access to free, appropriate public education.
Are public schools not supposed to educate everyone? Well, this is not the case in Cuyahoga, Ohio. 5 mothers have come together to fight for equality in their child's classroom so they are not discriminated against for drooling or facial expressions they cannot control.
Dr. Leo Lanner of Johns Hopkins University has recently developed a new term to classify children with a certain severity of restricted or repetitive patterns of behavior. He calls this disability autism. His research is a major step for the special education system as they are now able to narrow in on the specific needs of students with this disability.
Sources say that in order to better reach the goals of their organization, 23 different special needs advocacy groups joined forces to create the National Association for Retarded Citizens.
I just got word that Plessy versus Ferguson has been overturned. The Brown versus Board of Education court case has been ruled that separate is in fact not equal. Obviously, a major shift is coming in our way, particularly in the realm of education. Schools and classrooms are no longer allowed to be divided based on race, ability, or any other demographics.
Cora here, reporting from the annual education conference in Chicago. Everyone is buzzing about Samuel Kirk's use of the term learning disability to describe students with disabilities that impair their learning.
Schools around the nation have begun to take advantage of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA, which incentivizes state schools with grants if they develop programs to educate students with disabilities.
On October 8th, the PARC vs. Penn case called for students with disabilities to be placed in publicly funded school settings that met their individual educational needs, based on a proper and thorough evaluation. The case sided in favor of students with intellectual and learning disabilities in state-run institutions.
Parents around the country are celebrating the Mills versus Board of Education court case in Washington, D.C. that recently made it unlawful to deny students with mental and learning disabilities or behavior issues publicly funded education.
A new law in place has banned discrimination of students with special needs and disabilities. Schools are already buzzing about how Section 504 will change education for the better.
It's true. We've just gotten word that all students with disabilities will be educated in public schools. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act is providing free special education for students ages 3 to 21, as well as supplemental services and least restrictive environment.
Students with IEPs, also known as an individualized education plan, must now be in as many regular education classes as possible in a classroom like this one. This ensures that the student has social experiences. You may also see more pairs and aides in more classrooms, as it may be required by certain school districts. This is what least restrictive environment is all about.
Another landmark court case, the Board of Ed of HHCD versus Raleigh has designed a 2-part test to help determine whether free appropriate public education is being met according to a student IEP. This will hold schools accountable for providing a quality education to individuals with disabilities.
Ronald Reagan just signed the Handicapped Person Protection Act, enabling parents of children with disabilities to have more say in the child's individual education plan. A monumentous occasion for parents and students across the country.
President George W. Bush has signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law. This will promise all people with special needs the same rights as everyone else in the state for both school and work. Most importantly, stated in this act is that people with special needs cannot be discriminated against in schools, the workplace, and everyday society such as public transportation.
President George W. Bush is really active this year. Not only did he sign the American with Disabilities Act this past July, But today, October 30th, 1990, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA, was signed into law.
The Individuals with Disabilities Act has been reauthorized this year with a few updates. Regular education teachers are now included in the IEP process. Students will have more access in their general curriculum and must be included in statewide assessments. ADHD has been added to the list of conditions that could make a child eligible for services under the category Other Health Impairments.
No child will be left behind due to an act signed into law by President George W. Bush. He expects with the implementation of the No Child Left Behind Act, all students will be proficient in math and reading by 2014.
Now I will shoot you over to Cora, who is here at Loras College meeting with Professor of Special Education, Dr. Brent Daigle, who is going to give us some insight on special education today.
Where did you study special education?
You don't study special education. Special education studies you.
How long did you work with students who have at least one learning disability?
Never. I've never worked with students in my life. That's a joke. Edit that out. First year of teaching, I taught at St. Mary's, which is in Rapides Parish, which is they call them parishes, not counties. It was an institution for kids with severe disabilities. The other 10 years, I taught in New Orleans, kids with behavior disorders and students with autism spectrum disorder with autism. So what was your question?
How long have you been working with students?
11 years. With students with exceptionalities, 11 years.
And what is the biggest change in special education you have seen over the years?
There's really been two changes, if I can say two. One is that as much as possible, students with exceptionalities are in classroom settings around their non-disabled peers, and also that students in special ed populations have a much more individualized education than they have in years past.
Can you share one success story of a student you've worked with in special education?
Well, yes, I can. Thank you. Thank you, Cora. Let me tell you about Natasha. That's her real name. Because a lot of times people put fake names. But I'm proud to tell you, Natasha, she'd be proud to know that I'm talking about her. Natasha lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And she's a student of mine she was in the 4th grade. And she's a student with autism. She was in a self-contained classroom because of inappropriate behaviors. And Natasha is a success story. Let me tell you why. She's now has a college degree, I think it's an associate's degree from the Baton Rouge Community College. Just recently, she had her first child, and she's living a very independent life. She is working hard. And so the Natasha that I knew as a 4th grader, and the things that people were saying about her family and other teachers, and they were saying that she's, not going to be independent and be able to be self-sufficient, is not the Natasha she is today. And I'm very, very, very proud of her.